This podcast is for entertainment and storytelling purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice. Some topics may be sensitive. Please listen with care and seek support if needed. Welcome back to the Because She's Adopted podcast. I'm your host, Kristal Parke. If you're new here, this is the podcast where we blame everything on being adopted. Just kidding. Today, my guest shares her deeply personal journey through abandonment, reunion, and identity as an adoptee. She opens up about painful family dynamics, the emotional complexity of meeting her biological parents, and the surprising places she found healing. This episode is raw, it's honest, and it's a look at what it means to reclaim your story and find yourself in the process. And you might recognize Amanda from my Are You Adopted clip. And so I'll just go ahead and welcome Amanda.
Thank you, Kristal. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, when I did the Are You Adopted clips of people, I had no idea what I was going to do with them. There was no thought that went into it. I just thought I'm just going to go around and ask people if they're adopted and what that means to them. And then when I went back and looked at these clips of all these adoptees who shared their raw and honest responses, and I think it was cool too because it's not like I had any of those videos up yet, so nobody knew what was going to happen with them either, right? So you couldn't really go in and think ahead about it. But when I got to yours and I started editing yours, it haunted me almost. Not in a bad way, but it was I just felt like I had to know you more. I wanted to know your story. And I just wanted to scoop you up and hold you in my arms. Is that weird?
No. I think that was I feel like that whole weekend, because that when I met you and you recorded that, we were in DC at the Making of Me podcast event. And I think that whole event was like a big hug, just felt so validating. And I felt so much a part of the community, and it was just a wonderful experience. So thank you, though. It's not weird to hear that. I feel like from our community of all adoptees, it's just been their love and compassion towards each other's stories has just been a wonderful experience and a blessing to be a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to play a little audio of Amanda's response to the Are You Adopted clip. Here it is. Are you adopted?
Yes, I am.
And if you could give me one word or phrase to describe what that means to you, what would it be?
I would say it means being alone. Being alone and not having, for me, it's never having a mother, because I feel like I was abandoned by both my birth mother and my adoptive mother.
Your Are You Adopted clip has had the most views on almost all of my platforms, which I don't necessarily care about that, but it was just, I always find it so interesting to go in and see how people respond to these honest explanations of people's experience with adoption. Have you gone into the comment section?
I only saw what the responses through Instagram. I know, I think it was somewhat connected to Facebook, but I don't really use Facebook all that much. So I didn't see, I feel like I saw a lot of the more positive or compassionate responses. So, and I know when I made that comment, I truly, in that moment, I was like, how am I feeling? What's just coming into my mind? And I truly said that from a place of just authentic feeling. It's just really what came into my mind in that moment. And I remember hearing my friend Lynn say, take your time, like think about it.
Oh.
And like, don't rush into a response. And you can hear her in the background of the clip saying that. And it was so sweet, and then I kind of worried, like, oh my gosh, was I too vulnerable? Was I, was that an awful thing to say? Because, I do love both of my mothers. So, but it's not as simple as that. There's a lot of emotion and complex feelings behind that, and it doesn't mean that neither of them were mothers to me that didn't care about me. But if I'm really being honest, there's times where it's just felt really lonely when it's come to the mother-daughter relationship.
I think that's so relatable for me. And I think the world looks at a clip like that, like people that aren't in the community, and they think, why is she so ungrateful? That's not what adoption means. Like, that was just her experience. It does feel vulnerable to share your story and put it out there. And it's almost like the more that I share my story and it becomes real, it becomes like more real to you, and you feel more connected, and there's that whole ownership of your story. So why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit about yourself and your story?
Well, I was born in Western New York. So not only did my birth mother live there, but that's where I was adopted as well and grew up. I know the hospital I was born in, and then I was only there for a couple days, and that I was brought to my adoptive family. So I was never in foster care. There was no adoption agency involved. It was a private adoption, kind of. My adoptive family knew people who knew about my birth mother and her situation. So it was all done pretty private. And there was I guess the hospital wasn't on board with adoptions. So they were like, we don't want anything to do with like the actual adoption. So someone had to pick me up from the hospital and do an exchange in a park nearby, which I've heard that from a couple other of the adoptees, like in that I was born in 85. So that same kind of decade, like it was after the whole baby scoop era and that type of adoption stories. So 80s, I feel, is like a very interesting time for adoptees. And I like hearing stories from the same time period as my adoption, because it's interesting. There's a lot. And it's crazy to me that like a hospital or anybody would just be like, oh, this is super normal just to go to a park and exchange a newborn baby with somebody. And like, that just shows you how unregulated that all was. I mean, sure, there was legal paperwork, but to me, it's just crazy. I didn't even know about that part of my story until, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago. Like that, I never really knew about that. So crazy to me. But my adoptive parents, neither of them were able to conceive naturally. So they had some fertility issues. So they decided on adoption. I remember my adoptive mother saying that they thought about IVF, but that was like not common back then. And it would have been very expensive. And I don't even think anywhere near them in New York could offer the services. So it wasn't like it was today. And then it was just, they were going to look into an adoption agency, possibly overseas. And then they heard about the situation through some friends. So that's how I kind of ended up with them. I do have to say, like my childhood, going through it, I felt like I was a normal kid. Like I was very lucky. In the aspect of, I didn't have any bad experiences, such as like abuse. I had a loving family. And I know, the whole word lucky, tough for us us adoptees to, say that sometimes because of all we've lost. But in that aspect, I do remind myself of like other situations other adoptees could have been in and bad situation. So in that aspect, you know, I had a very loving family. And my parents did all the, you know, made sure I was healthy and safe and in a, you know, safe home, and um, all the good, you know, I went to Catholic school as in for grammar school, that type of thing. Like they were trying to check all the boxes to ensure that, you know, I had a good childhood. And I think being adopted, they certainly I'm sure they wanted to give me the best they could. I wouldn't say they were very well off financially, you know, but they made ends meet, and I had a lot, you know, I had pretty much anything I could want. You know, they did their best to give me, you know. That all being said, now looking back as a what I know now, and learning about coming out of the fog, and this didn't happen until like my late 30s, and just the trauma that we've all experienced, whether it's major or slightly, you know, how we measure that trauma. Each adoptee, I feel like, feels differently about that. Now looking back, I could see so much of what I was experiencing it now makes sense that, you know, it wasn't quite as normal as I thought maybe I was having a childhood. Like those little experiences of not feeling you fit in, or the extreme anxiety, the hypervigilance, the different issues that, you know, relational issues that I had with my parents. You know, now that all kind of comes to light once you're an adult and you look back on it and you have all this information, it kind of, it's interesting because like you just see your whole life in a whole new light, you know, in a whole new way. I was very close with my adoptive dad growing up. I'd say me and him were a little closer. I kind of had maybe a little bit, I'd say, better of a relationship with him because he was the fun-loving, jokester, like easygoing guy. And everyone like growing up was like, "Oh, your dad's so fun," and like he just was just a very lovable guy, a very generous guy. My mom was a little bit more of like the discipliner, like just kind of a little more serious. She just always kind of seemed a little like stressed out or, you know, worried, and, you know, they would get into arguments and this and that. And I could see now, you know, a lot of her actions were projections on what she had been through in her life. But as a kid, you don't know what you don't really know what your parents have been through. So it was hard because there were times where I just felt that, you know, I felt like I was behaving in a way that was just normal to me, or, you know, I'd have these feelings come up as a young child and I would get in trouble. You know, I would get, the number one thing was you have a big mouth, and like, you know, and like that was like always said. And my mom would just get so upset with me. She's like, "You're just so," you know, I can't remember all the words she would say, but not necessarily horrible words, but just like, "You have a big mouth, you're so disrespectful, you're so disobedient." And I didn't understand. Like, I felt like I was just this nice, sensitive little girl. That really stuck with me. And like, you know, we all know we were in survival mode in different ways. And I was such like a people pleaser, always like kind of fawning to just make sure like she was happy, and I would get so much anxiety, even as a young kid, like, how am I going to control my emotions? How am I not going to act in these ways that my mom is telling me that I'm just misbehaving all the time? Because I really was a good kid. Like, I never got in trouble in school. I always had good grades. I mean, I never got in trouble, and I was always like nervous to get in trouble. So when she would get so upset with me, it was like I was really confused as a kid, and it gave me a lot of anxiety about, you know, following the rules and not messing up.
Was the overarching sort of feeling was it just of disapproval?
Yeah, I'd say I think looking back, I think she was just, I think she just had so many things about herself that she didn't do right in her life. Yeah. And the minute, you know, I didn't just behave, like, she always wanted me to be the nice, polite little well-behaved little girl. And I really was in public, especially. If I just showed any sort of like frustration or, you know, it just normal things that kids feel as they're growing up, or just like feeling cranky even, you know, and it would just be like, you know, I just felt so wrong. Like I was always just I couldn't do things right for her. And I don't want to make it like, I mean, it wasn't like that all the time. I mean, we had our good moments, and, you know, she was always worried about me and making sure that everything was okay with me and wanting me to be happy. I knew she truly wanted that for me. But it was hard. I mean, and I think adoptive parents not having the tools or the knowledge of what we're going through with, you know, our trauma of being separated from our birth mother, and just, you know, that attachment that we just don't understand is happening to us at such a young age. I just don't think she had the tools to even understand, you know, the emotional intelligence to understand what I needed. And then I was expected kind of to provide what she needed to kind of undo all the missteps she took in her life. And so this started in childhood and progressed into me becoming an adult, and our relationship throughout my whole life.
I feel like I relate to that. I feel like, you know, I was the girl that came along, and my mom was going to give me everything that she never had and wanted me to be everything that she never was. And I think because I really felt so different from my adoptive family, that I feel like, well, in some circumstances, she did allow me and nurture me to be this authentic version of myself, like, but only where it sort of made her look really good. Like if I played the piano for the church, or I sang at Christmas concerts, or whatever that looked like, that was acceptable. But if I was being really goofy and silly in front of people, she would get like embarrassed or something, and she'd say, "Don't be so silly," you know, and shut it down. And I think like you said, I don't necessarily blame her for that. Like I don't think that she even knew what to do with her own emotions half the time, right? So I mean, this is so common for adoptees to have this pressure of fulfilling this role and being this certain type of person. And then what does it do as for us as adults? What ends up happening is that we end up, you know, being 40 years old and not really knowing who we are.
Exactly.
And so why don't you go into that a little bit more?
You know, and because of my mom struggled with confidence as well, and she really wanted me to kind of have that, like you just said, kind of have my own where I'm different from her, where I'm more confident and I'm achieving things that she never did. And that also, like, you kind of think like, okay, maybe this is part of my identity. But because she lacks some confidence, and she wasn't able to teach me certain, you know, ways of becoming a confident woman. And I feel bad saying that, but I mean, it's just something we all struggle with that, you know.
Yeah.
But she, you know, there were certain tools she didn't have. And then if I didn't quite get to that point, it would kind of be like, well, why aren't you achieving this? Or why aren't you behaving in this way that I've like tried to tell you should be? And then you kind of like are like, oh wait, like I'm trying my hardest here, but you know, I'm not quite meeting her expectations. You know, as I became a young adult, you know, because of her lack of confidence, and there was a lot, I think she kind of stayed stuck in this role of like she also wanting to be taken care of. And when I was 18, my adoptive parents, they decided to split up. and my mom moved out, and I was going off to college, and so in some ways she was trying to better, like she was obviously unhappy in the relationship. Her and my adoptive dad stayed on friendly terms, so there was never like this really anything hateful or anything going on in that aspect. But I know she was really always kind of looking for like a partner to really take care of her, and because she never went to college or had that type of career, whereas I went to college and I started building my career at a young age, and I became very independent at a young age. She really liked that about me, but then it kind of became this parentification of, well, now, like, okay, you're becoming smart and you're learning about life, so the things that I never learned for myself, like, you can now step in and kind of take care of me as well. And then it so quickly, before I was like mentored or even like emotionally given what I needed from a mother, she then wanted to become friends. As in, like, okay, I'm now not with your father anymore, so let's I want to tell you all the intimate details of my relationships, and kind of leaned on me in that way. And that was really like, I didn't realize it at the time. I just kept feeling like I had this job to be there for her and fulfill this role that she needed. And it was really confusing for me. It was really hard. And I just feel like my early 20s into my mid 30s just felt like a blur. Like I was just, I was always feeling this this need to fulfill what my parents needed. And it was like, okay, you're an adult now and you're independent, great, now you could do all this for us, kind of like, like it was just like I just went from being like a kid, and then it felt like I owed them now to take care of things.
I think we know still now that, like, even as a 42-year-old woman, like, I still miss my mom. I still feel like I need to be mothered in some ways. Like, I look at these multi-generational homes where you've got like the children and the daughter and the grandmother all living together, and just the ability to learn and hold each other, through life. I don't know what it's like to be a 40-year-old woman raising teenagers, but my mom did know that. And I really, especially now that she's passed, I really feel like I'm missing that. Like, I feel like I really could use a mom right now to be like, you know what? These years are going to be really hard, but you're going to get through it and it's going to be okay, So, yeah.
I understand that completely. Because I still am looking, like, even both of my birth mother and my adoptive mother are still in my life, but I'm not getting what I feel like my adoptive mom feels like she has always been looking for what she needs, and I'm still looking for what I need as well. And and like in that aspect, like, I'm really compassionate towards her. And like, even though she couldn't always give me what I feel I needed from a mother, I still, like, my heart still goes out to her, because I feel bad that, she's gone into some details, but she hasn't fully explained always, like, there were things she'll say to me that she should have went to therapy for, and she should have figured out, but she always says it's too late now. Like, she just kind of like gave up, and that being said, like, there were times in my life where in my early 20s, my adoptive father, like, after my mom left, he struggled with like depression and mental health issues, and he was a very functioning alcoholic for most of my life, but it got kind of worse once my mom left. But I mean, he was probably, he was like, even if he drank, he was like just this nice, like, not even, I mean, he didn't like go out, like, he was just more so like he would drink after work and come home as like a comfort, but he was always just so kind. And then he'd maybe just like fall asleep. Like, he never did anything dangerous or hurtful when he was drinking. And I know I could have been a much more difficult situation to deal with. But when I was in my early 20s, it finally kind of came to a head where he wasn't able to function at work anymore, and he ended up in the hospital. And I didn't even know how bad it was. And when I got to the hospital, it was like just me. Like I didn't say this before, but I never had any siblings. I never had any adopted siblings or anything growing up. So it was just me. And I show up at the hospital, and the doctor's just telling me like, oh, he was pretty much, his blood alcohol level was like beyond any limit he should be driving or doing anything. And he drove a truck at work. So his coworkers kind of took him to the hospital and everything. And like, I was just shocked. Like, I didn't know that it had gotten that bad. I was like 23 and like trying to start my career, and like, I didn't know what to do. And, my mom ended up coming to the hospital, and I'll never forget, like, we were, they kind of explained some things that were going to happen now, and that he would go through detox and whatnot. And she was like, well, I'm in a relationship right now with someone, and like, I can't be the one like helping with this. And like, you're going to have to step up and go to like the meetings. And like, I literally had no vacation time at work. And I was like, how do I do this? Like, I don't know what to do. And, I mean, he did have some family and everything that reached out and stuff like that, but it really was all on my plate, as the only child. And from then on, I mean, he did really good kind of getting through that part. And he was, as far as I know, for a while, he was doing well with being sober and everything like that. But after that, he kind of got himself into difficult relationships and situations, financial situations, that his family was always disappointed about, and my mom still kind of had that control aspect. And she was always trying to, not only my mom, but some of his family members, which is like, get me to fix what he was doing. And kind of like, well, you're the only one he would listen to. And after that, I mean, it really kind of not destroyed, but like my relationship changed with my adopted dad after that point, because then it became like, okay, I'm the parent now. I'm the one who has my life together and has to like keep it together. But at the same time, like, I was trying to explain to everybody, I'm like, he's a grown adult. Like, I can't force him to do things just because everyone else thinks it's for the best for him. So in those moments with both of my parents, like, I felt like I didn't have another parent to say, hey, how do I understand you guys aren't in a relationship anymore, but how do I get through this? It just kind of became something like I didn't know what to do. And this was like all such a distraction from me figuring out who I even was, especially in that time of being a young, like in your early 20s, figuring your relationships, job, career, how your life's going to go. Like, I was so distracted with what I had to deal with my adoptive parents.
That's such a burden to put on an individual who really is just launching into her life. And wow, I'm so sorry that
Okay.
happened.
It's
And
okay.
and so it sounded like you were trying to set boundaries, but people weren't listening to you.
Yeah.
And like that, how difficult that must have been.
During that time, I eventually ended up moving in with my mom briefly because I was trying to save to buy a house at that time. And I just remember it just being so challenging with her. And it's like she knew I was very independent, but yet she still wanted to have some control over what decisions I was making or what I did in my life. Like, God forbid I went out with a guy and like maybe stayed out late, and like, here I am, a young adult, like I was like 24, 25, like I was able to do those things, but she would have something to say about it and kind of shamed me about it. And kind of like what you said, really resonated with me. What you said earlier about like, if you were to act goofy and your mom would say, don't behave that way. Well, I had instances where we would go to family functions, and sometimes around like your cousins or the younger generations, you start to kind of become yourself. You maybe share things that you may not share with the adults, or and I would find myself getting into conversations where I felt more comfortable with different family members, where I could share things a little more vulnerable or just be a little more honest and joke around, whatever the case might be. And then I would get like the next day I get a phone call from her and say like, I didn't like what you were talking about. Like, please don't, say those things. Like, you embarrassed me because I told a family member that you loved your job, and you were making remarks that there were things you don't like about your job. And it makes me, like, she was very concerned about how it made her look. And then I felt like, developing an identity and feeling confident in my story and in, how I was feeling, I always kind of just questioned it and kind of felt, somewhat gaslit about, just my life in general, because, you think your parents know best. So, and especially in that time frame, like I just always felt like I was doing something wrong and I was behaving wrong. So it was hard for me to develop a close relationship with myself, because it was from the feedback I was getting from the closest people, my parents. It was just like, you're not doing something right, with my mom. And so it was somewhat lonely. And around the same time frame when I was still living with her, I had made like a simple mistake. I think I was helping cook like a holiday dinner, and I accidentally dropped a cutting board. And her immediate response was, and this is like the same thing from when I was a kid, was, "You're so clumsy. Like, you need to be careful. What, stop. Watch what you're doing." And it always kind of felt like I was criticized, especially if it was just like sometimes people drop things, or, like a simple little mistake. And I had learned one of my character flaws, I guess you could say, is just being very defensive. But I know I developed that from a very young age with having to defend myself with, my mom and everything. So in that moment, I got defensive and I said, "I'm trying my best. I didn't mean to drop this. Can you just not criticize me?" And she then said, "You're talking back to me. Like, you got to stop behaving that way." Like, and so I kind of felt like she got this control to always say however she felt about me and criticize me. And I had no say in the matter. I just had to accept it and just go along with it and be okay with it and never defend myself. And after that, I kind of walked into a different room to kind of cool off after that interaction with her. And then she came like after me and was like, "You're putting on such a bad demonstration in front of the family of like how you behave, and you're embarrassing me, et cetera, et cetera." And then the night went on, and then the next day I had gone to work, and I was so emotional and so upset about it and just so distraught. And what I always would do, which is why I really struggle in conflict, is I said, "Okay, well, I don't know how to fight back about this." And like your brain is just going like still in that mode of like, I can't be abandoned. So that means I have to apologize, even though I don't feel like I did anything. I feel like I had a right to stand up for myself. So I did what I always did, is I begged for her approval, begged for her apology, and just like I would go into it and just be like, I know I'm so awful. I know, like, I always mess up. I just would put all these negative things on myself, because I always felt like I had to make sure that people knew that I could self-reflect and take the blame, because I felt like, okay, then, that was my only way to know how to get through a situation like this. And when we had that conversation, she had said, "Well, I'm really glad that you came to me and you apologized, because I was going to ask you to leave." That has stuck with me my entire life, because asking you already have this abandonment, like deep abandonment wound. and your adoptive family is going to just kick you out because you didn't behave properly. Even though, like, I mean, you would have thought, like, I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm not like doing drugs or like a criminal or, you know, like
or
doing
being
anything.
or being abusive. Like, it's not like you flew off the handle and you started like throwing stuff around the kitchen and calling everyone an asshole. Like,
yes.
Oh my gosh.
So that's it's always been like, I just never understood it. And I think I'm finally now understanding where this comes from with her. And I know it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
You know, I know that.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the time, I was so confused. And so to get through all of that, I ended up, you know, I finally ended up in a relationship that was not healthy. I ended up getting married because his family seemed so different than my, you know, like kind of like just like I could get along with his mother in a different way. And it felt like something I had been looking for, you know, like we could have a glass of wine together and just kind of chit chat. And like I wasn't criticized about things or, you know, and our opinions aligned a little bit differently. And so I kind of clung to that, even though I wasn't maybe in the best relationship. Like I was just like, oh, this family seems so stable. And I think other adoptees fall into that same, you know, that same trap of just feeling like, well, you know, I don't feel like I fit in with this family, so maybe I can marry into a family that feels more accepting, regardless of what I have to maybe put up with. But it was that same thing, that same like abandon yourself, people please, and maybe it would all get better. Maybe it would all work out, you know, but that wasn't the case. So
as you're talking, I'm thinking so many things. So first of all, I'm thinking, here you are in this like in this dynamic with your family that so much is put on you. You're expected to behave, you know, in a certain way, which creates this sense of like perfectionism. And if I don't behave in this way, then people are going to reject me, which I don't know about you, but for me, that has really translated in my adulthood, in my adult life, within like friendships. So I'd go to like a ladies' gathering or something like that. And then I'd, you know, be myself, but then I'd leave and I'd have this crazy shame spiral that, oh my gosh, should I have said that? I hope they know I was joking. And you overanalyze and question your entire behavior of the whole night. And then I'd end up phoning and being like, oh, I hope you didn't take it this way when I said this. And people, most of the time, people were like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And I just felt kind of crazy, honestly, like, and just, I didn't have this freedom to be who I was. But I think part of it too was when you are always behaving in ways that everybody is sort of imposing upon you, like when your whole existence is just this pressure to be who the people around you want you to be. And then you continue that in, you know, romantic relationships and friendships, the distance between who you actually are and the persona in which you're trying to put out there. My connection to who the authentic version of me is gets further and further and further away. And then I just don't even know who I am anymore. Exactly. And how can you have trust for somebody that you don't even know, including yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, you go, and you're just like, you're saying so many things that are hitting so hard. I feel like I'm in this space in my life where I'm really where I feel like I've really grown to know who I am, and I've gotten to form this really trusting relationship with myself, yes, which has been a game changer.
So, well, that was a really great explanation of basically what I was going through as well. And I think maybe somewhat similar, like now, once I was in my late 30s, and I had to make, I think my first step in choosing myself and saying, okay, I'm going to start to trust myself, was deciding that I needed to leave my marriage. And because that was huge. I mean, you have a house, you built a life, like everything seems so in place. And then that's the thing, nobody knew how I was feeling in that relationship. Like there was just a completely different persona. And I don't know why. I always was, and it must have related back to the experiences of my childhood. I was always so nervous to talk with, whether it's my parents or my girlfriends, to talk about the challenges in my romantic relationship. So going through, I wasn't physically abused or anything like that, but verbally, like things were just not, I wasn't being treated respectfully like a woman should be treated. And it was really hard to admit that to people. And I think that it was just that disconnect with myself, feeling like, am I even worth it? Will people believe me? Like, because you just don't trust yourself. So my first step in that whole process was to leave my ex-husband. And I stuck with it, because usually I'm like the type of person that might be like, "Ooh, this is really scary." Like, and him saying, "Oh, well, let's try to work it out." Like, I stood my ground and I said, "Absolutely not." Like I've put up with too much, and it's gone too far, and I don't want to hear anything more. And I stuck with it, and I'm really proud of myself that I did that. But then I also said to myself at that same time was, I need to fix what's going on with my family. And I didn't realize that meant fixing me and digging into my adoption, because that's really where everything was centered. And I had no idea, because like you had said earlier in our discussion, so many people, like maybe when they watched my video about how I felt about adoption, um, they might say, "Oh, well, my friend had a really great experience." Well, I was that person saying adoption didn't bother me. Like, I had anything I needed in my life. I got to go to college. I had, support and a home and, all the things anyone could want in their life. Why would I have any issues with adoption, or why would I need to find my family? And I was like I always told people, no, it doesn't bother me. And little did I know how much it really did. So when people say that, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to be as vulnerable and honest and come on this podcast too, is because for all the other adoptees that maybe are just way too scared to admit that to even just themselves, I know, like, I think hearing more and more stories, it's kind of made me feel less crazy, and also just kind of made me feel like, okay, I can do this, and I can get through it, and I can find out about myself and go on that journey. So, so once I went through a divorce, and then I met my current boyfriend, and he was a game changer, because I really started to work on myself. I started going to therapy, not really anything adopted yet, but it really was a complete different experience when I had my romantic relationships prior to that. And he was actually really interested in my adoption story. And I told him pretty much right away. He started encouraging me. He's like, "Why don't you do a test? At least see, like, what are you genetically, like, what are your heritage?" And this brings me to the fact that I was adopted into an Italian American family. So very big Italian American family. Like, both my parents had brothers, sisters. Everybody's really close. I truly enjoyed that part of my family dynamic, because I was very close with cousins, and I feel like in that culture, it's very important to be close with your family members and do a lot of events together. And I was very lucky that I got to grow up with a really big family that was very loving and fun, and just kind of what you see in media of like Italian American families. It was very typical of that. Of course, my romantic partners have always tended to be Italian people or guys that have been of Italian families and everything. So it's just like a comfort. I guess I mean, they say you kind of go for what's comfortable, so that was certainly part of, I'm sure my subconscious was like, oh, this is comfortable for me. So, so my boyfriend, he was very encouraging about taking a test and maybe finding out who my family is. And I think if I didn't have his encouragement and like that positive encouragement around it, I was very like nervous. So I ended up doing 23andMe. So it turns out that I am Irish and Polish mostly, so not Italian. And that being said, like even though I had a great experience, there were things growing up where my mom would make like derogatory comments about people who are not Italian. Like it was harmless. Like it was supposed to be kind of funny, but it was kind of like, oh, well, they can't cook because they're not Italian. And it was like they were very proud of their culture, and as they should be, of course. But being adopted into that, I mean, it's kind of like I knew I wasn't. I think we had like vague paperwork that kind of said like of European descent, like that was it. So, but I kind of knew by the way I looked, my fair skin and like freckles and like my hair and stuff. I was like, I'm probably not Italian, and like I didn't really look like even though I was white, my parents are white. I definitely looked different than them. I always had this like, well, like I got to pretend to be Italian and got to be like really proud about it. But then somewhere deep down in the back of my head was always like, but you're really not, So it was just like, I mean, I can only imagine if I experienced that for something that's just, like a little bit of like a cultural difference, even though we are the same race, I can only imagine what other adoptees go through on a much different level of like different, interracial adoption. So, but I mean, it really plays people don't think that it plays a big role, but it does. So, I found out what I am, which was cool. Go ahead.
It's like a whole other level of like disapproval, right? Like, and disapproval for just like existing as the person that you were created to be, right? And yeah, you're right. People don't really think they don't think it's a big deal, but those little things like that just are the insidious little reminders that we just don't quite belong, or that we're different, right?
I'm just starting to get to know certain things about, my genetics and my cultures and stuff. So I found that out first, and it was so quick. Like the only match that I had was a first or second cousin. Everything else was like, fifth, sixth cousin, whatnot.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend was like determined to reach out to this person to get more information. And I was so like scared, like, like maybe they don't care or what, I don't know how they're going to feel, but their name, when we went on like Facebook to kind of put the name in there. And I should also say at that time, because I was born in New York State in 2020, I think it was, or 2019, they passed a law that you could get your actual birth certificate. So I had already done that. So I had my birth mother's name. And that was like crazy. Like just to even have that was, I know I'm very lucky because so many adoptees don't get to have that. And the fact that it was on file and available to have. So I had her name, and when I Googled this cousin or Facebook searched this cousin, I saw the same last name of my birth mother's name come up for all these family, like people linked to her and whatnot. So I was like, she's got to be related somehow.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes when you message back on those sites, they may have not used it in years or whatnot. So my boyfriend like paid to like get her information, and then he like was calling her, emailing her, like all this stuff, and she was just like, well, who is this person, but she did, once he kind of told the story and kind of gave my birth mother's name, she was like, yeah, I know this family, but she didn't want to like give away too much information, so she just went ahead and like kind of said, hey, sure, I kind of know about this. I'll put you in touch with somebody else. So within like 2 days, she had given my, it was my aunt, the sister of my birth mother, my information. So she was going to call me. So, and like when I found out it was the aunt, I was like, well, why, if she knows my aunt, she must know my mom.
Yeah.
Like they're sisters. So yeah, like
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah.
So I was like trying to prepare myself. Maybe she passed away, or, you know, like I had no idea what to expect. So the aunt called me and she was all like, is this a scam? You know, like
Oh my
they, you know,
gosh.
which I totally get that.
Yeah.
But it's so discouraging for adoptees. Like you have to build up so much courage to do this, and like you didn't even ask for this to happen to you, and then people have to be like, oh, are you scamming me? You know, like it's just another one of those little struggles like we have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So we spoke, and like she was like she wouldn't really give much information away about my mom. And she was like, but she, you know, she lives like across the United States and she's not local anymore. And, you know, we'll have to meet and then we'll see. Like, it was like I quickly learned that she was like the gatekeeper of this whole family and whatnot.
Okay.
So
okay.
I end up meeting her, and so this is like the first real relative, biological relative I've ever met. And it was pretty surreal. And, you know, she told me some things about the family, but she really wouldn't go into detail about my mom because she kept saying like, well, she's going to have to tell you that. And so it was like this really interesting first step, because it was like, I have this family member, but yeah, I don't get to ask all the questions I want to ask or know all the things I want to know. And you're just kind of like, I wish this could be my mom, like not the aunt, you know, not that.
Was all the gatekeeping, like, did that translate to you as rejection?
I mean, it felt a little funny. I think looking back, I could definitely see that as being a red flag, but I was just so anxious and excited that I might have a possibility to speak with my birth mother that I just looked past all of that. But it did feel a little funny.
Like, did it feel cold?
A little bit.
Yeah.
That's
hard.
And even my boyfriend kept saying, he's like, come on, like, where's your mom? Like, why can't you just call your mom? Like, why is this so difficult? You know, which it is difficult. I mean, it isn't just the simple, you know, situation. So the next day she said, you know, your mom wants to talk to you and here's her phone number. You can call her. So I got permission. I call her, and, you know, we talked for the first time, and it was crazy. And that's when I really started to learn in that conversation. And then it turned out that she was going to be visiting the area. I was still so I was living in upstate New York, but my boyfriend lived in North Carolina. So I was going back and forth for a couple of years until I eventually decided to officially move to North Carolina. But so I was still kind of near my hometown. And she said, it just so happens that I'm going to be visiting my hometown this year in like a month or two. She had no idea about me. So it was just a crazy coincidence. And she's like, so we can meet in person. So between that first conversation where she kind of told me all like life details and then meeting her in person for the first time, that's when I really started to learn and like understand like the rejection, because I mean, she was so happy to meet me, and it was like all she ever wanted in life was at that point was to meet me and know that I was okay. But hearing her story was really hard, and I think just a lot more, I don't want to say depressing, but just, I mean, it was such a happy moment, but like as an adoptee, it's hard to hear some of the things that when your birth mother shares with her. It's like you really want to know these things, but then it's heartbreaking at the same time. And your brain is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, I understand that, but then your heart feels differently. So she was saying things like, you know, I knew that I wanted to, relinquish you. It was a really hard decision and I was really stressed about it. So when you were born, I didn't want to see you. I didn't want to look at you. I didn't want to know what sex you were. I just wanted you taken away. And that was so heartbreaking to hear, because you understand that it's going to be hard for her to see the baby and to know like she has to give it away. But then it's just, and then it just kind of becomes, and it's like I can give her space, and I could, my brain is just like, yeah, I completely understand that. But my heart, is like, well, where do I fit in? What about how that felt for me to hear that, to know that my actual mother didn't even want to hold me or see me or anything. So that was heartbreaking.
Oh, that is. So when you first had that conversation with her, like that very first conversation, what was the vibe? Like, was it like, hey, Amanda, how's it going? Like, what was it like? Was it tears? Was it that sort of gatekeeping feeling? Like, and then tell me about the first meeting, kind of what that was and what was going on for you.
I think the phone call, I think we both were just kind of like, whoa. I wouldn't say it was super emotional. She was excited. I was excited. And she kind of just, it was almost like, it just kind of like stating the facts. Like, I found out that she worked for a company that I actually ended up working for as well, which is how she met people who knew my adoptive parents. And because she was working there when she was pregnant with me, she wasn't sure what her decision was going to be, but she explained that everybody encouraged her. And then when she found out there was a family, it was like she really wanted to, she was like, I felt so confident once I knew I had this wonderful family. And like, but I'm like, you don't even know who they were, just weird, interesting facts like that. And then, just, I have 2 half brothers, and she told me about them. She told me about her family. It was just a very factual. It was just like,
okay,
here's the past. Here's what happened. And then she made a comment that she was like, I want you to be able to ask me any question. So of course I was like, well, why? And like, what was going on with my birth father, and like, all that. And like, she just shut down. Like she was like, it was a bad situation. And then she's like, I don't really want to go into it. So it's like, she went from telling me I can ask her anything and that she's an open book to completely shutting down about the, my birth father and like the relinquishment and all that. She did specify, that my grandparents, her parents, like would not acknowledge, her pregnancy, did not accept it because she wasn't married, et cetera, et cetera. They were strict Catholics. Although my birth mother said that she never, even when she became adult, she wasn't, she really didn't practice the religion or anything like that. But what then surprised me too, which I did find out when I got the birth certificate too, was that she was 28. So she was not by any means a really young mother. She was working full time. She had gone to college. She was living on her own. So that part was a little shocking for me, because a lot of times you hear, stories of like really young mothers who really don't have a choice. And it would just kind of always make me feel like, well, like, was there really a choice? And she never really went into details about like wishing that it didn't have to happen. Like, because then she just kept, once she knew that like I was almost 40 years old, I had like, a quote unquote good life, and I had a job, and, I'm independent and taking care of myself. I think she just was like, that's all I needed to know, and everything's great, and now I can rest happy, like, and like she didn't want to hear about like the little difficulties of my life, or that I didn't really have the relationship I hoped for with my adoptive mom. Like all of that kind of like just really went over her head, and she didn't really want to get into that. So, and it was really confusing, especially the first time I met her. I mean, like we hugged and everything. But there definitely was a coldness. There wasn't this like, feeling that I thought I would feel for my birth mother, there. It was exciting, and I was trying to like look at her and find features about me that matched and just kind of take it all in. But she would just make interesting comments or just kind of talk about, like I said, like the whole like giving me away and not wanting to see me. And then like I tried to ask about like different allergies or things that I experienced as an infant that I knew about. And she made like, oh no, like, because I asked if my brothers, went through that. And she was like, oh no, they were breastfed. So they're fine. Like, and I was like, do you not like, I'm like, for an adoptee to hear like how she took care of her kept children, and then to kind of be like, oh, they didn't experience that because they were breastfed and kept by me. Like, I don't think she was understanding that some of the things she was saying was hard for me to hear.
Yeah.
Like it was like she couldn't put any of my perspective into her story. Whereas I feel us adoptees, even though we might have guilt and anger and our feelings about our parents, like we're constantly worried about their feelings, and like how what we say is going to affect them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I even think just on like a societal standpoint, people just don't understand how things can be so hurtful to adoptees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when even a birth mother has been steeped in that, right?
Yeah.
And then they connect with us and then they're saying things that just seem so thoughtless. You can't necessarily fault them for it, but like you're still a person who's having to experience these hurtful things that you're sitting there with, right?
Yeah.
And those things said, they don't leave you quickly. Like they stick with you.
Yeah, they really do. And I don't think I was even like understanding it at the time. Like I was just like, oh my God, I'm meeting my mom. And then it took a while to look back on all those conversations to realize how I really felt about what she was saying and what we were going through at that time. And she also, she had a hard time talking about my birth father during those first few meetings. And she kept making comments that like he was a horrible person. And then she also put the responsibility of connecting onto me, because she kept saying like, oh, I'm just kind of surprised it took you this long to find me and reach out to me. And she was like, I thought, as the years went on, I wasn't, you never looked for me. So I thought maybe you were just a cold-hearted person like your father. And I was just like, and at that point I knew nothing about him. And this is the information I'm getting about him. And she was like, kept kind of like, well, I could tell you his name, but only if you really want. And then I felt so awkward to ask for his name at that point because of all these awful things she was saying about him. And after she had visited where I lived, I said I wanted an opportunity to meet my brothers. And so I paid for and planned this whole trip across the United States to see her. I obviously asked if it was okay and everything, and she seemed very excited about it. But when we got there, it just kind of, I don't know, things just kind of didn't go quite as planned. And I had ended up not even getting to meet one of my brothers. And she kept bringing up the same kind of thing, like, well, I didn't want to tell them about you because what if you never reached out? And then they would be heartbroken that they never got to meet their sister. Like I had this responsibility. Like I'm like, I didn't even choose this to happen in my life. How does this have to be? And like, I don't think people realize how scary and how much courage it takes to even want. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't even probably have been as far as I am if it wasn't for like my boyfriend, who just thought this was like super fun and cool to do. Like, thankfully he helped me along so much, because it's so scary. And that was just really hard. Like after I visited her and she didn't invite me to her home, she like it was just got really awkward. And even my boyfriend was like, what is this? Like, how does she not even invite you over? Like you flew across the country to see her. And it was just like, but then after we had left, she would text me all these meals she was making and hosting and doing all this stuff. I'm like, why would you share that? Like, how is this not connecting
There's
for you?
such a disconnect for her.
Yeah.
Such a disconnect. Like she just
I
didn't have those skills.
Yeah. I
Wow.
just think, like, I know there's a lot of trauma there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that even though she never really said it, that she really didn't ever want to let go of me, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know, I truly know that in my heart, but because of all those things she said, and because of, you know, her knowing while she was pregnant with me, because I mean, this is talked about a lot in the adoptee world, is just in like the scientific part of it, and just like the stress the mother is going through, and knowing that she's going to relinquish, like the baby knows too. And I truly feel deep down that I've always known that, like going through my life. And I think that's where that honesty of that answering that question came from when you asked what is adoption, because I think no matter how perfect of a mother my adoptive mother could have been, or no matter what she did, she couldn't fulfill that loss that I was just born with. And I just feel like there's just this emptiness for me that, you know, and I was hopeful, like, oh, maybe meeting my birth mother, like she's going to fulfill some of these things that feel missing for me. And it was just not quite what I was expecting, for sure.
Right.
You know, in that experience with her.
Do you feel like both your adoptive mother and your birth mother had these like ideas of who you were, or saw you through a certain lens that just was not you? Like maybe they saw you who they expected you to be?
Yeah. I think in some ways, especially my birth mother made this when I had visited her. She had wrote me a card the day I had left, and she wrote and said, "You are beautiful, intelligent, wonderful." I'm just trying. I don't know. I don't think those were the exact words, but the gist of it, like all these like very complimentary adjectives towards me. And she was like, "And you are that way because of your parents." And it was just like, and I think that was just kind of like, she doesn't even see me. Like, sure, I could be those things, but yeah, like I think it was, they say, you know, how we go into that fantasy kingdom of like of thinking about what our real parents, you know, who they are, and trying to think of like what the experience would be, or who, like the type of people they are. And I think my birth mother probably did that too, you know, like they know you're out there. And so she just, I'm sure she just wanted, you know, once she saw me, or and like I kind of said before, I think she just, you know, saw that I fit this mold of what she was hoping I'd be, and I did. And then she didn't want to know anything more than that, you know. And I just don't think she has the courage right now to go any deeper than that. Like our relationship, I still speak with her occasionally, but it's just completely like surface level, almost like a long lost relative that once in a while you say hello to, you know. There's no deepness in our relationship. So
did you eventually ever connect with your father?
Yeah. So not long after that visit, my boyfriend was like, okay, this is it. Like, we have to get his name, because after how heartbreaking of an experience that was, he was like, we just need to get this final missing piece of the puzzle, because you really don't know until you meet him. He could be the nicest guy in the world. Like, why are we taking what she has to say like as the truth? So I finally asked her, like it was very nerve-wracking, but I had to kind of like really pry it out of her. But I asked her his name, and she gave it to me. So again, my boyfriend tried to reach out. Like we Googled him because he was like a property owner, and he actually still lived back in my hometown. So we were able to easily get some information on him. And during that period of time when I was trying to get information, like when you find obituaries, you really can put a lot of pieces together. And I ended up finding an obituary for what were his parents. And it turns out they were living and had passed away in North Carolina. And that's where I had moved to. And I was like, oh my gosh, like of all states, like here they are in the same state as me. Even though I figured like obviously I found the obituary, so I knew they had passed. So he tried reaching out to my birth father, and he never responded. So by then I had gotten a adoptee competent, well, she's an adoptee as well, therapist. So things were really moving along progressively with having someone like that in my life. And she encouraged us to write a letter, explain myself, explain my intentions, and then see where it goes. So I did that, and immediately I got a response. He said, hey, I would like to call and just talk with you. And it was really casual, really laid back. And he kind of said, I wasn't in a relationship with your birth mother. I kind of gave her the option to do what she wanted to do. Things, we weren't together, and I didn't want to be with her. And so things just kind of got messy between the two of them. And basically, eventually he was approached to sign paperwork to like basically relinquish his rights. And I guess he told me that he kind of pushed back on that, and he didn't really understand, what that was going to entail or what that meant. But he didn't deny. I mean, like when he called me, he goes, no, like I'm totally your father. Like I know what happened. And he didn't try to like deny it or say like, I don't want to talk to you or anything like that. So, so I can understand, like from a female perspective, I can understand, she was experiencing something in a way, and then he experienced something in a way. But that's between the two of them, but
yeah,
to paint someone as like a horrible, hateful person, like, I don't know. And like to kind of push that storyline to someone who's trying to find out their identity and their who they are is somewhat troubling.
Well, because it kind of reflects on you, right? Like it's not, it doesn't make you look at him and think, oh, he's like a bad guy. It's like, oh, then what does that make me?
Exactly. And that's why when she said that comment of like, maybe you were just going to be a cold, heartless person, like your father, like that really threw me off. So we ended up connecting, and he did tell me the story, like, oh yeah, my parents moved to North Carolina years ago. My sister still lives there. And we were like, wow, so crazy that I ended up there. And so when I was in New York, we met, and it just, everything clicked. Everything was just, very similar personality, senses of humor, like, and then it was finally like, oh my gosh, I can actually be like this, even though I'm figuring out who I am, it's like, I don't have to hide anything. Like I get to just be me and not do that thing that you mentioned before, where I leave like a social event with him, and then I think, oh, did I say the wrong thing? Or, oh, I don't have that anxiety with him and any of his family. And he's just really accepted me just as I am, and has been a parent figure in a way of like not expecting me to do anything, like any work, like he puts the effort in to call me, to reach out to me, remembers things I'm interested in, and is always trying to plan events and or times to get together, but without that pressure. It never feels like I have to do it. And it's just been really like the highlight of this whole experience. And, you know, and at times it's bittersweet, you know, like you're kind of like, well, what would have my life been like had, you know, I had this type of a parent in my life. But at the same time, like, then that guilt comes because, you know, like I know my adoptive family did their best and they had their issues. And you know, this past year, my adoptive dad unfortunately passed away.
I'm sorry.
He had some other health complications, and I know he just struggled to really take care of himself. And I think some of it was mental health as well. And so there was this weird, like, as I'm developing this relationship with my bio dad, I'm like also having my adoptive dad pass. So in like, like kind of go through that experience. So it's been like, there were times where I felt guilty about it, but then there were times where I really tried to remind myself like how lucky I am to get to experience this now. Like have almost like having two dads, you know, having the experience of even though I had to say goodbye, like, you know, even though my adoptive dad never knew that I went through this, like maybe if he did know deep down, like maybe he'd be like, okay, I'm glad she's not alone, like doesn't feel alone or has like another support system there. So, so it's been, that aspect has been really wonderful. He, you know, and I mean, that doesn't say that, you know, he was perfect in in the whole situation, but at the same time, like, you know, I that's between them. Like, I can't sit here and like, you know, dissect exactly who was right, who was wrong. And I mean, he did, one of our first meetings, he said to me, you know, I researched adoption and what adoptees go through. And like, he like went and did all this, you know, insights on like our experience, and he just started apologizing and saying like, I can't imagine how hard it's been to live your life like that. Like, I was shocked. I was totally shocked to like get a response like that, and just that he did that on his own, and to have that like emotional maturity to want to see what my experience was like. It meant a lot to me.
Oh, it means the world.
Yeah,
like, I mean, isn't
huge.
that all we've ever wanted, was to be seen and validated in our experience? And oh, I love him. I love him. Please tell him I love him.
I
will. My birth father was very similar. The experience was very similar, and same, like, just acknowledged how difficult it would have been for me, and, you know, apologizing. And I think the beauty of relationships, that you get to feel so much freedom to be who you are. And that's what it is. The relationship has a real sense of freedom. You get to be you. I get to be me. We just get to accept each other and exist together. And there's no expectations. And I think that's what's so hard with maybe some of my other reunion relationships, is this expectation that, you know, now we're going to be either a big happy family or we're not, or, you know, whatever it is. It's just that there are those expectations, and it's really hard to be who you are when you're trying to please. And, you know that all you have to do is be Amanda in that relationship, and that's enough. That's enough. And you get to just be loved because you're Amanda. Yeah.
I think that's the goal, like that we're all of us adoptees are trying to get to that place, and to feel, like you said earlier, like I finally feel like I'm figuring myself out in my identity and feeling comfortable with it and trusting myself. And one of the things that I know is somewhat controversial was I decided not to tell my adoptive mom any part of my reunion journey or share those parts with her. And a lot of people ask about that, you know, what does she think, and that stuff. And I think to go through this experience in the true way that I wanted to experience it in the full way, I had to do it without her knowing, because I think I just know it would have changed how I did things. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have had the same experience or the same relationship with my birth father that I do now. And I think it would have, I think she would have struggled for sure. And I hear so many adoptees say, I wish I never told my adoptive family. Like
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot. And like I kind of I was lucky enough to start listening to stories and get into the adoptee space right before all of this. So I kind of had that knowledge, and it took a long time for me to decide what was going to be the best way to do it. But then I had other people validate that decision too, that knew my mom and knew, what would be the best way. And a lot of people agreed with me. So, yeah, that it's been a tough thing. And I do, there's times I feel guilty. But like I said, I feel like it's me owning it, and it's me owning my story and knowing like who gets to have the privilege to now know the parts of me that are me, and I think about all those times that she kind of rejected certain things about me, like don't behave that way or don't say those things. And all those little things kind of chip away at our relationship and chip away at what she gets access to. And I don't mean that in a really hurtful, mean way. It's just, that's my way of my boundaries and the way that I can protect myself now and tell my story and live truly the way I feel I deserve to live. So that's been kind of a tough thing. I know a lot of people, we talk about that quite a bit. But I felt it was important to share that because I know people struggle a big time with the relationship, having to almost feel like they lived like a double life,
Yeah.
And it's hard.
I'm really glad that you touched on that. I just have the way that you've honored yourself through this journey
Thank you.
is so admirable. And I just love and I connect to that ability to really lean into who you are and connect with who you are and do the things that honor yourself and honor even that younger version of yourself who you had to abandon to survive, really.
Yeah.
What would you say to that 23-year-old girl?
I would say it's going to be okay. You're going to achieve things that you never thought were possible. And it might feel uncomfortable now, but you're going to get to a place where you're in full control of your life and what you desire, and you get to enjoy things in your own way. And you don't have to conform to even your family or society's expectations. You can do things your own way.
That's so beautiful. My eyes are tearing up. Thank you so much, Amanda. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for coming and sharing your story, your experience. You really just inspired me so much today and touched my heart. You touched my heart from the first time I met you when we were in DC, and you shared that video, and I've just wanted to get to know you more. Are you going to be in Austin? Did I see that?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I could miss an event again because
feel that.
It was so wonderful. Yeah.
Yes.
And I really can't wait to see your documentary yet again. Like that was just really DC was one of the best experiences of my life, in the adoptee world, especially. It just was so wonderful to come together, to meet you, to dig into everybody's stories and just be in that space together. I couldn't pass it up again. And I love Austin. I don't know if you've ever been, but Austin's a really fun city.
I've never been to Austin. I've been to Houston before.
Okay.
So for those listeners that don't know what we're talking about, Adoption, the Making of Me podcast is having a live event in Austin, Texas. It's April 17th and 18th, I believe.
Yeah.
And we're going to be showing the Because She's Adopted documentary. On the Friday night, we're going to be doing they're going to be doing a live podcast, a panel, and there's going to be lots of adoptees there. If you've never been to an adoptee event before and you could make this happen, I would say please come, because it really is a life-changing experience. And you're welcome. When I went to the first adoptee event, I was scared that I was going to be rejected and everyone was going to hate me.
I know.
How dumb.
I said the same thing because I've done like a couple adoptee writing classes and really immersed myself in different adoptee spaces. And that was still my worry. I'm like, well, I'm not going to fit in because no one really knows me. Is my story good enough? Like,
yeah.
Total adoptee way of thinking. Like, it's like, no, this is where you belong. Like, everyone's thinking that, but yet we all, like, there's an acceptance and a love amongst all of us that you really can't get elsewhere. You know, it's an
true.
amazing feeling. So yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna include the Eventbrite link in the show notes of Amanda's episode. And Amanda, if people want to reach out to you, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram, so I can share that. And you could also include my email. I don't really do a ton of social media, but willing to anyone that wants to reach out or connect on my story or their story or have similarities, very happy to connect in that way. So.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you, Amanda, for being here today. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the Because She's Adopted podcast. You can find us on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast. Like, follow, subscribe. Come over to Instagram or TikTok and give us a follow. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.